good afternoon, everyone. My name is Will Cruz, portfolio manager for South Carolina Research Authority. This is part 3 of the Tech Startup Lifecycle series. I have Cliff Holekamp from Cultivation Capital, who is their managing partner here with me. So he's been gracious enough to offer some time to answer some questions regarding this series. So Cliff, let's jump right in if that's okay with you, or if you want to give a quick intro on yourself and we'll start.
Sure. Great to be here. Thank you, Will, for inviting me. Cliff Holekamp. I'm the co-founder and managing director of Cultivation Capital. We're an early stage venture capital firm. We invest all over the country. We focus on software companies, life sciences companies, agriculture technology companies, and geospatial technology companies. And I'm located in Greenville.
Awesome. Thanks, Cliff. All right, so we'll jump into it. I got 5 questions. I know, we can ping off of those. First question: common mistakes founders make getting ready to prepare to fundraise. What are those common mistakes, or what does that beginning journey look like?
Well, so many places we can start with this discussion. So I guess let's start before we're fundraising and talk about being ready. And so I like to tell people that you should, it's never too soon to make introductions and build your network, but you shouldn't pitch until you're ready. And so what that means is that asking for advice, getting to know somebody socially, professionally, who might be a prospective investor, are all great ideas to do as you're early in your journey. But as soon as you ask them to take a pitch, as soon as they are thinking about you from the perspective of, am I going to give them my money? It's a different conversation.
Yeah.
And it's going to be one that's more critical, right? And I like to say you don't get a second chance to make a first impression, but there are different types of impressions. So it's okay for them to get to know you as someone who's just asking for advice, or someone that you work together on an ecosystem initiative. Maybe you volunteered for a tech event in your hometown, and you got to know each other through working together on a philanthropy, something with an ESO, or maybe you reached out and wanted some specific advice or help about something in the business. All those are great ways to get to know each other, but they're not pitching, right? But so I would say never too soon to build your network, but don't pitch until you're ready. And you've got your numbers together, you've got your story together, and you've got a clean, crisp message.
Great advice. So someone's doing that. They make the introductions. We're going to go to that next segment. Okay. They're getting ready to pitch now. Now they're going to have that formal conversation. As you said, it's a different conversation. Tell us about that. What should they be thinking about my pitch? How long? Valuation, dilution, terms, due diligence, data, what pitch, walk me through a little bit of us, or the viewers of that. Now we're getting a little bit down the cycle, the spectrum.
So just starting somewhere where it's kind of simple. How long? What does that look like?
Yeah.
First, I would say is always use a deck. It's funny how frequently I get entrepreneurs who say, hey, rather than using a deck, let's just keep this a free-flowing conversation. Well, what that usually means is an unstructured conversation full of rambling. And so decks are good for a reason. They exist for a reason. It keeps you on point, and quite frankly, visual aids help tell a story. And so I would definitely use your pitch deck, and you should plan for a fairly short pitch, 10 to 15 minute kind of presentation. If it's something highly technical that takes more explanation, maybe a little longer, but you really want to be as concise as possible. And the goal for that first pitch is just to get them interested. It's not to tell them your life story. It's not to tell them about every single detail that you might be so proud of. And just because you've thought about it, you don't have to prove everything you've ever thought of in that first meeting. So the goal is just to get them interested, no further. And so what do they need to know to be interested? They need to know a little bit about your background. And of course, to tailor that depending on how well you already know the investor. Number 2, they need to know about what is the market demand? What problem are you fixing? Next, exactly how do you fix it, right? What is your value proposition? You should get into the economic model. What are the economic metrics surrounding your solution? How do you charge? How much value that you're creating are you actually capturing, and in what way do you monetize that value? And then typically you would then get into the financing strategy, and the investors want to definitely hear about financing strategy. How much money are you raising? Why that amount? What's it going to do? What kind of terms are you thinking about? And so other things I'd say are optional. How deep you go into your marketing plan, how deep you go into the competitive analysis. Those are all good things. And ultimately, you're going to be telling them everything over a full due diligence period. But that first pitch, you want to keep it to the core basics. And I'd say, for an example, do I get into a competitive analysis? If you're in a sphere which is perceived as highly competitive, then yes, you should. If you're in a sphere that is probably not viewed as competitive, that you're probably a first mover, maybe it doesn't need to be on that first meeting. Maybe that's something you get to, down the road when you dig deeper into the details.
Got it. So the takeaway here, what you're saying then is enough to whet their appetite to say, I want another meeting.
I want to know more.
Yeah, I want to know more. Okay, got it. That's the takeaway.
You don't want to sell past the close, and you don't want to sell somebody out of being interested by continuing to talk when you've already achieved your goal.
Got it. Great point. Great point.
Related to that question, there's an age-old debate about whether you come with your own terms or whether you ask the investor to give you an offer.
Got it.
I don't know if there's a right answer to that question. I can just tell you what I like to see. And I think different people have different preferences. I think it's good, particularly for an early stage entrepreneur, to come in with a sense that they know what they want. To come in with the right amount that they need, and to come in with a reasonable valuation in mind, and to go ahead and say it. People are worried, well, what if I say a number that's actually lower than what the investor might be wanting to do? Or what if I go in too high and blow the deal because I sounded unrealistic? And I think it's, rather than fearing what you might do wrong, I would look for the opportunity for what you can do right, and do your homework, get advice, and impress that investor with coming in with a reasonable financing plan at a thoughtful valuation. And doing that will give you so much benefit and make you look so credible and knowledgeable and thoughtful, and like someone who's really got control of the opportunity. I feel it's just a little indecisive when an entrepreneur comes in and says, I have no idea what I'm worth. I'm looking for an investor to set the terms. That does happen more frequently in later stage companies, but in the earlier stage companies, I'd like to know where their head is and like to know where they're coming from, and like to get a sense of how well they know the market.
So don't be afraid to say what you want and what you pursue, and be able to kind of more or less back it up.
Absolutely, as long as it's you got good advice and it's a well-reasoned, and of course, organizations like yours give really good advice on this topic. So the advisors are out there to help early stage entrepreneurs come out with reasonable thoughts and expectations. And if someone comes in too high, I'll tell them, and we're not afraid to make our own offer.
Right.
But I still like to know that the entrepreneur is realistic.
Great advice. Okay. Moving on. Talk to us about, now the founders. Okay. People say good money. People say strategic money. Some founders are, as long as I get the cash, when I run the company, I need the cash. Versus, I want to take money from the right people that could not only give me capital, but give me advice, insight, open up their network, help me with customers, guide me, mentor me, which is far more sustainable and strategic and valued versus, here's some money, let me know how you do later on. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, my thought is there's the perfect world and there's the real world. So you're absolutely right. And we can all speculate about the perfect world where you only take smart money that's going to be value add and give you tons of advice, and is not going to be beating down your door for reports and giving you all kinds of trouble. That's where you should be focused. You should absolutely focus on smart money first. but there is reality out there, and sometimes you got to do what you got to do to get the money to keep it going. So realistically, I think it's enough of accomplishment in the early stage world to just raise good money. It doesn't all have to be smart money. And so there is bad money. And so, bad money would be money from investors who can't afford it, from friends and family who maybe the investment makes them uncomfortable. And you're going to have a relationship issue because maybe they did something that they shouldn't have, that it was too much risk that they really should have taken considering the size of their investment portfolio. Or someone that's going to be constant nervous Nelly because they're so desperate to get a return. People who are invest when they maybe economically shouldn't are a liability risk. There's someone that could have dissatisfaction later and could represent a liability for a lawsuit, or could otherwise be a negative reference for you if they ultimately were uncomfortable. So there are bad investors, but someone that's neutral and is a positive supporter but maybe isn't experienced or sophisticated can be okay if as long as you're still able to find other sources for that advice and that guidance. I'd also say in the category of bad investor, be really, really cautious about not making wonky or unconventional deals.
Okay. Elaborate on that.
Yeah. So sometimes you get people who have money, but they're not experienced in angel investing.
Okay.
And so they might be a good fit from a portfolio perspective to make entrepreneurial investments and startups, but they may not have the experience to know what makes for a standard deal. And sometimes they ask for terms that are not considered industry standard. And in fact, in our industry could be considered unprofessional or put the business at risk. So examples of wonky, what I call like wonky terms, would be things like a permanent board seat. Right. Or a non-dilutable equity. I want 10%, no matter what, it can't be diluted. Something else that can be really hurt a company's prospects in the future are right of first refusals. Not quite as wonky, but it's equally can be troublesome. That they have a right of first refusal for any other offer to invest in the business. Anything that gives that investor special rights beyond the rights afforded to a preferred equity investor is something you have to really get advice on, because when a follow-on investor sees these special rights, they're going to look at it one of two ways. They're either going to say, well, if this person got it, I want it for myself too, which could then be really damaging for the entrepreneur to have then these special rights amplified by future investors. Or more likely, if they actually know what they're doing, they're just going to say they're going to pass, because they recognize that term puts hair on the deal, and what we would consider makes the company uninvestable. It's possible that you have an investor that is so interested in what you're doing and has the patience to coach you. They might say, hey, here's what you're going to need to do. You're going to need to go back to that old investor, get them to waive that right. We're going to redo the documents. Sometimes you'll find someone who will go through that with you. But more often than not, they're just going to say no, because they've got lots of other opportunities to go to that don't involve all that extra time and all that extra trouble. And, follow-on investors don't like to be the bad guy either. And they don't want to have to end up a party to a negotiation with your old investors to get to change terms. So, just think, is there anything about these terms that a future investor will look at and think that seems a little too good, a little bit unprofessional? And ironically, these are things, even though these are things that benefit investors, a sophisticated investor realizes that they aren't good for the company long-term. And part of being good for the company long-term is what's good for the entrepreneur. Right. Because as a later stage investor, we want to make sure that our entrepreneurs are happy and well incented and have all the right economics and have all the right control for them to stay motivated, excited, financially, emotionally, every way, to continue to do a great job in that company. And we don't want to see anything in those investing structures that takes away from their opportunity.
Yeah.
And so yeah, wonkiness, or sometimes we just call it hair on the deal, um, is a great way to ruin a good company.
Yeah.
And sometimes an early stage investor, entrepreneur, will compromise and take deals that that they don't want to because they feel like they have to get the money. And my argument there would be, get someone in the industry to help you and to help explain to that prospective angel investor why it's not in their best interest to hamstring the company with wonky terms. There's a concept called National Venture Capital Association Standards, or NVCA standards. And you want to make sure that all your documents, whether it is a convertible note or a safe or an equity round, all meet NVCA standards.
Got it. Great advice. Moving on to an investment thesis from a founder perspective and from a investor perspective. Talk us through an investment thesis from a investor perspective of what do you look for, right? I mean, you hear that notion, and bad analogy, we invest in the jockey, not the horse, right? We like the terms, but the biggest thing is the team. We don't want a bigger check size, or we like to follow on fund. We really like to double down. We like investing in trends, and we like, walk me through a little bit of that as to, do you think founders need to have an investment thesis as well to make sure they know what they're looking for, what's going to help them, but it also aligns to what the investment thesis is from the investor, if that makes sense of merging them the two.
It does. And I'd say I'd start with that the foundation of any sales process, and this is a sales process, raising money. The foundation of any sales process is understanding your customer. You can't make a sales pitch if you don't know what your customer is looking for.
Got it.
Right. And so, the reputation of the fast talking salesman, do you know why he's talking fast? It's because he doesn't know what you want. Trying to say as many things as he can, right? Before, and hoping that one of the things he says is the right thing. And then that'll resonate. And so you don't want to be the fast talking salesman. You want to be the educated salesman, right? And so you want to make sure that with any pitch to a potential investor, you want to understand what they're looking for. So what is their thesis? And by the way, when we're talking about angel investors, they may not have a thesis.
Right.
And so, or not, but they still do. They still have a motivation. Right. And so remember, in any pitch, whether it be for your product or for selling equity in your company, to really have a deep psychological understanding of the reason and the motivation for them to do business with you. And so, it might be that an angel investor wants the opportunity to make a difference, to mentor a young entrepreneur, that maybe they think what you're doing is aligned with their interests. Maybe it's a healthcare startup and they personally were impacted by the problem you're addressing. Maybe it's in an industry where they have a lot of experience and they want to share their knowledge, right? And so if you understand what the motivation are, you can help deliver that. And so in the case of angel investing, it often does have to do with mentorship, knowledge share, opportunity sharing. And you want to make sure not to forget to let that investor have that opportunity. That for them, it's not about the money, it's about the relationship. And so you want to provide that relationship, right, that they were looking for, and take advantage of that opportunity fully. For firms, it's going to be, it might be more of a stated thesis. It may not be, it might be a little easier. It might be on their website. It might be, and they'll tell you, you literally would start any relationship with asking about their thesis. What are they looking for? How does that, what is the overall fund strategy? And then think about how what you're doing does or does not apply. If you're a software maker and someone's a hardware fund, probably just the wrong one to talk to, right? I mean, it's just the wrong one to talk to.
I agree with you.
You might still ask them, do you know any software funds that you could introduce me to? But you don't want to go beating your head up against the wall when all along you weren't listening to what they told you right on their website. We're a hardware investor.
Right.
And so you always want to present what you're offering within the point of view and the perspective of that investor. And
Yeah.
so, what there might be the types of things they invest in, the industry, what kind of growth rates are they looking for?
Right.
What kind
Right.
of qualities do they look for in founders? How long do they like to hold? Do they do follow investments? Do they not? The more
Right.
information you can get, the more likely you are to be able to then craft a pitch that's going to most closely meet their needs and make them interested.
I absolutely, I think that's a very critical thing. I don't know if enough founders, from what I've seen too, they do their homework enough to find out.
It's
They're
hard,
chip size, right?
they're busy, they've got a lot of meetings, and
Right.
but it's worth taking that time. And I'll tell you, you can waste a lot of time calling on the wrong people. I've had some really awkward meetings where somebody just starts talking and they don't stop talking for 30 minutes, 45 minutes. And I can't even like get a word in. And at the end, I have to say, just so you know, we don't invest in retail companies. Oh, well, why didn't you tell me sooner? I tried, right? So that happens sometimes. So
Yeah.
it's always best to open up with saying, I can't wait to tell you about my company, but tell me a little bit about what you look for, and help me understand if what you're looking for, so I can tell you what parts of this might be interesting to you.
Cliff, I wish you would have been around, or I would have known you, or gave this advice to me when I was a founder years ago. Probably would have saved me a lot of headache and a lot of time and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. But nonetheless, this is great information. My last, question would be, what one or two things would you give as the most critical thing a founder needs to keep in the back of his mind about to fundraise, during fundraise? What are those two things you just got? They're pillars, and you got to stay within them or keep them in front of you. What are those?
Well, I guess the cardinal rule is don't run out of money.
True.
That's how people go bankrupt.
Yeah, very true.
You might have heard about that.
Yeah.
It sounds a little coy, but cash management really is important. And it is the core of any organization. Don't run out of money.
Yeah.
And that means keeping a very close eye on cash, on spend. And when you are running out of money is when you end up desperate. And so you always want to fundraise well ahead of running out of money. You want to have a spending plan that gives you enough cushion. So it's half joke and half very serious. Don't run out of money. The second thing I'd say is not too dissimilar, but that is, as an early stage entrepreneur, you can't do it all. You can't run every single piece of your business with perfection. If you do, you're going to end up doing everything in a just okay way. And so, from a matter of your own personal focus as a founder, you need to every day wake up and focus on what's going to move the needle. What activities today are going to help me achieve my goals, are going to have the biggest impact on moving the company forward? Because every single day is a choice of how you're going to leverage resources, your cash resources, your human resources, your own personal time and energy. And the fact about being a startup is you can't do them all well. It's impossible. And this is actually why a lot of corporate refugees struggle as entrepreneurs, because they're being used to being in an organization that is always operating at a high degree of perfection, where they're always crossing every T and dotting every I, and everything gets approved by accounting and by legal, and everything is buttoned up and pretty close to perfect. And you can't be that way. It's messy, and that's okay. That is part of being a great entrepreneur. Is it's going to be a little bit messy. You're going to have a lot of loose ends, and every single day you have to decide strategically to leave some ends loose, because you're going to be focusing on something that's going to advance your business with the most impact that day.
Cliff, like I said, I wish I'd have had this advice when I was a founder, but I think on behalf of everybody, SC Launch, the board that you serve on, and you're gracious with your time to help us and guide us, we want to thank you, and we appreciate your time.
Appreciate it. Thank you.